Hi guys, it's Rob from Royal Balls. Clutch 5 is now out of the egg and I promised you guys we'd take a look at that, so let's get after it. Okay guys, Clutch 5 is now out of the egg and as you can see we got a great variety of individual snakes in this clutch. Let's just remind ourselves of what the parents were. So this is Mum. This is a spinner ball python, which is a combination of spider and pinstripe together, and you can see that when you mix the two genes you actually mess up the pattern from both and leave just a very skinny and faint dorsal pattern on each side of the spine here. You do get the speckling from the spider, and the head stamp there you can see faintly still has the spider head stamp, but there's no pastel in this, so the head stamp is not blush. This is just a 2 gene animal, spider pinstripe, which is the spinner. And I don't actually have a good example of a pinstripe except from in this clutch, and this is a pinstripe pastel, which is a lemon blast, but you can see the characteristic pinstripe pattern. I think everybody knows what pinstripe looks like. So this is pinstripe and this is spider. So what happens when you mix these two animals together is you get Mum, which was the spinner, except she's not pastel. So this is pinstripe, this is spider. When you mix the two you get the spinner, which is Mum. And this is Dad. This is a super pastel leopard, and if you remember from a couple of videos ago, he was also supposed to be Mojave, but we've proved that he isn't with this clutch. There's no Mojave in this clutch either. So this is Dad and he is super pastel leopard. Because he's a super pastel, it means that all the offspring will carry the pastel gene. So if we go back to the clutch here, this is a superb example of not only how we can stack genes when we breed ball pythons, but also when we breed ball pythons how we can strip out the individual genes, or reverse engineer if you like, and the individual genes come out of the mix exactly the same as they went in when you bred the original animals. The genes themselves don't change. So even when you have a multi-gene animal where the genes are all mixed together and it's really hard to tell what genes are in there, when you breed the animals the individual genes pop back out and it's very easy to see what you have. So let's make a start on the clutch here. As I said, there is no Mojave in these, so it's fairly straightforward. This guy here is just a pastel. He gets the pastel gene from his dad, and there is no other gene in this animal. This is a straight pastel, and you can see that the pastel gene is unchanged for having been through the ringer with several generations of breeding. It is still obviously a pastel. Let me compare this pastel to a pastel from the previous clutch with the same father but a different mother. So this little baby here on the right has not yet shed. This little baby on the left here is exactly the same single gene pastel animal from father, and this animal will turn into this in a couple of months' time. There's the difference between pre-shed and post-shed. You can see the difference in the colour of the animals, but these are exactly the same animal, exactly the same single gene pastel from exactly the same father. In this clutch we also got 2 leopards. These are pastel leopards. Remember, everything is going to be pastel. So these 2 here are pastel leopard from Dad, and again both the leopard and the pastel, when you mix them together, gives a slightly busier pattern. But the leopard gene is quite clearly recognizable. Again, even though it's been through the ringer of several generations of breeding, you can strip it out and it comes out exactly the same as it went in. So these are two pastel leopards, and again let's compare these to one from the previous clutch. Same father, different mother, just to show you that the leopard gene is actually completely unchanged regardless of the mother. So there's the comparison here. This animal here is about 2 months old, this animal is newly hatched. If you remember, this clutch was giving me fits and I had to assist feed. Half of them are now eating, and this animal is eating by itself. Half of those animals are actually still being assist fed, but you can see this animal here will turn into this animal after shed, and you can see that quite clearly they are the same snake with the same genetic combinations. Pastel leopard, same father, different mothers. That's pastel leopard from this clutch. Now let's take a look at the two pinstripes. Everybody knows what pinstripe is. These have pastel in them. These are the two pinstripes, and so we have, they're actually lemon blasts because they have pastel, and you'll see that they are very slightly different. They have the same characteristics, but I don't think that there's any leopard in these. I'll reserve judgment until after they shed. The pattern is pinstripe, they have pastel, so these are both lemon blasts, so pastel from the dad and pinstripe from the mum. And you can see that even though mum didn't look anything like this, when you strip out the pinstripe gene pops out of the other end of the breeding process and looks exactly the same as the original pinstripe that went in. So that's an example of how genes don't change and you can strip them back out of the parents during the breeding. So we can both stack and we can reverse engineer and strip genes out, and they do not change. So those are two lemon blasts, and just to show you what happens when we strip out spider from the mum. Mum didn't look anything like this animal. She was a spinner, which is pinstripe spider, but when you strip out the spider and add pastel, you get a bumblebee. You can see the head stamp. You can see the distinctive pattern. This is quite a white snake. It will colour up after it's first shed and go yellow, but this is just pastel spider. It's a bumblebee. We can compare that to my Bumblebee calico. Remember, this has got calico in, so it's got very clean white sides. This is newly hatched, so also has very clean white sides, but it will colour up when it sheds. But you can see that the pattern and head stamps on these animals are both classic spider. So even though the spider gene here has come from a completely different set of parents, and the spider gene here has been through the ringer with a few generations of breeding, this spider and this spider are still exactly the same when you strip them out. So this is Bumblebee calico and this is Bumblebee from this clutch. And lastly, but obviously not least, I think this is the 4 gene animal. This is pastel, pinstripe, spider, so it's a spinner, pastel, so it's a spinner blast, and I think this has leopard in it. You can see the difference in pattern between the bumblebee. The spider is a much coarser pattern. The pinstripe is a much busier pattern. So this is a combination of the two. This is spinner. Spinner blast because it's pastel. And the leopard has messed with the pattern. So let's compare this animal to some similar looking animals. We'll compare it first of all to mum. So here is mum, and you can quite clearly see the similarity in the pattern. Mum is a spinner, and this offspring here is also spinner, but it has pastel in it, so it's a spinner blast, and this will colour up quite nicely after it's first shed. And again, just to give you an idea of the similarities and differences, this is a leopard lemon blast Desert Ghost, but the pattern is not really changed with the Desert Ghost. It just makes the animal brighter, and he is going into shed, so he's a little bit dulled out. But this is Leopard Lemon Blast, which is leopard and pinstripe, and I think you can see when we compare it to the baby that the pattern is actually much thicker and bolder on the Leopard Lemon Blast than it is on the Leopard Spinner Blast. Again, I'll reserve judgment until this animal sheds and we see exactly what we're dealing with, but to me the pattern on this animal here is much finer than on the Leopard Lemon Blast. We've got all the vertical components and modifications to the pattern that Leopard makes, but the Lemon Blast has a much thicker, bolder pattern than the Spinner Blast with leopard in it. So that's it, guys. That's the whole clutch together. My preliminary IDs are 2 pastel leopards, these 2 here, 2 Lemon Blasts, a Bumblebee, a pastel and a Leopard Spinner Blast. And I think you can see that even though the genes in the pairing have been through the ringer of several generations of different snakes, when you strip out the genes and bring them back to their individual elements, the genes stay exactly the same. So when we breed ball pythons, not only can we stack genes, when we breed them we can also strip the genes out and reverse engineer the animal and see the gene in its original form, and it does not change. Amazing how genetics works in ball pythons. That's the Super Pastel Leopard, and he isn't Mojave. We've proved that now, so I'm not disappointed in this clutch. It does have some really nice animals in it, a great variety of animals. And mother was the Spinner, and she's also given me some pinstripes, some spiders and another Spinner combination as well, so I couldn't have asked for a better outcome from this clutch. Not disappointed at all. I haven't sexed these guys yet. We'll wait for them to shed and I'll give you another look, but for now, notice how white the Bumblebee is and the Leopard Spinner Blast here. Look how white it is at the moment. When they've shed, I do expect them to colour up and go quite yellow, so we'll take a look at the difference after the first shed. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that, looking at a little bit of reverse engineering in ball pythons. I've got 2 clutches in the next 2 days due to hatch. The first is another het-to-het lavender clutch, and the second clutch due in 2 days time is my fire clown to my pastel vanilla clown female. So this is the vanilla cream, vanilla scream clown clutch, which I'm really looking forward to. Stay tuned for that. We'll see you next time.